I want you to just close your eyes for a second, and
Uh-huh.
I want you to imagine the sheer crushing weight of 1,000 years of memories. Picture carrying a full millennium of existence in your own mind. You're just watching empires rise from the dust, build their massive grand monuments, and then crumble right back into the earth over and over again.
Just a relentless cycle.
Exactly. Think about the profound, almost suffocating isolation of outliving every single person you have ever loved. Every era you ever belonged to is just gone. Now take that exact agonizingly long lifetime and imagine weaponizing it, using it to pull off the ultimate ancient espionage mission.
It is quite the setup.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are plunging into a truly atmospheric, shadowy expanse of history today, working from excerpts of a fascinating source titled Chasing Death, the Immortal Spy. Our mission here is to explore the severe, almost terrifying duality of a man named Zayn.
And it is a phenomenal character study to unravel. Because on one hand, uh, Zayn is a grieving son. He is deeply traumatized by the endless nature of his own life. But you flip that coin, and he is a flawlessly cold, hyper-calculating intelligence agent.
Operating on behalf of the legendary Carthaginian commander Hannibal.
Right. It's a narrative that takes this supernatural burden of immortality and forces it into the high-stakes, deeply cynical framework of classical geopolitical espionage.
The atmosphere of this entire account is heavy. It feels, well, perfectly suited for late-night listening in a dark room. We aren't dealing with immortality as some flashy, invulnerable superpower here. It is a complex, almost suffocating reality. Okay, let's unpack this because the sequence that brings us all into focus begins with a very quiet, very lonely return.
A homecoming of sorts.
Yeah, but a bleak one. Zayn has been wandering the earth for 1,000 years, and he finally makes his way back to a hidden pyramid cavern deep in the desert. He's drawn there by this faint, lingering trace of maternal warmth that he can somehow sense drifting out from the darkness. He just wants to visit the grave of his mother, who the text refers to as the Queen, and his uncle.
But the reality of 1,000 years is that the earth does not hold still for your griefs. When he actually arrives, he is confronted by a massive stone placed at the mouth of the cave. And it hasn't just sat there weathering the centuries. The sheer weight of time has caused this stone to fuse entirely with the pyramid's own structure.
It has basically become one with the rock.
Indistinguishable from the surrounding foundation, it is completely immovable.
It's nature literally sealing the door on his past. He is locked out of his own history.
Exactly. And that physical barrier forces Zayn into a desperate, almost feral state. I mean, he doesn't have machinery. He just searches the perimeter in the dark until he finds a tiny, crumbly fissure tucked near the foundation, and he starts digging,
Hmm.
barehanded. For hours, he just grinds away at the earth until he widens it just enough to drag his body through. And there's this brilliant psychological detail right before he enters. He pauses. He actually considers what manner of creatures might have bred and multiplied in that stagnant air over 10 centuries.
Which is such a grounded, distinctly human fear for an immortal man to have.
It really is. He might not be able to die, but he can still be trapped. He can still suffer. But he pushes the fear aside, strikes a flint to light a torch, and just lowers himself into the dark.
The environment inside is suffocating. The text describes the darkness as having an actual physical presence, pressing against the torchlight. There are cobwebs hanging like tattered gray shrouds, and the air is just completely dead. But despite all that time, when he reaches the heart of the chamber, the stone of his mother's tomb is unchanged. It's just dusted with 1,000 years of sand.
And this is the breaking point.
It is. This is where that century-spanning composure completely shatters. He collapses against the tomb and just falls apart. He weeps uncontrollably.
What's fascinating here is that what we are witnessing isn't just a son missing his mother. If we look closer at his internal monologue in the text, this weeping is the release of a profound existential terror. He has been alive for a millennium, and he knows death is strictly forbidden to him. He is constantly oscillating between two very distinct mindsets.
Big duality again.
Right. Part of him experiences this grand, scholarly exhilaration. He is a traveler moving in perfect step with history, holding a front row seat to the sweeping drama of humanity. He sees patterns no mortal could ever perceive.
But the shadow side of that is the sheer crushing exhaustion of it all.
Precisely. What happens when existence itself becomes a burden you can no longer carry? For mortals, the grave offers a final release, a natural conclusion. For Zayn, that door is welded shut. His inability to die transforms his life from a miracle into an inescapable rolling torment.
Which sets the stage for a massive shift in the narrative. Zayn is sitting there in the silence, having basically emptied himself of all this grief, when he hears a faint dripping sound.
Just a subtle interruption.
Yeah, and he follows it deeper into the cavern, and it turns into this persistent bubbling. He discovers a crystalline spring hidden entirely within the living rock, trickling into a pool. The water is ice cold. He cups his hands, brings a single sip to his lips, and the absolute second he swallows, the entire cavern violently shakes.
A massive earthquake tearing right through the foundations of the pyramid. Stones are dropping into the pool, the walls are groaning. Zayn is pressed flat against the rock, completely terrified that the structure is going to collapse and bury him alive for eternity.
Which is his biggest fear. But then it just stops. Dead silence. And a voice fills the chamber asking, Zayn, do you recognize my voice?
It's Saint Orion.
Yes, a divine spirit and Zayn's former mentor. And what unfolds here is a fascinating philosophical clash between a desperate man and a divine decree. Zayn immediately begs Orion to take him to his mother in heaven. He just plainly states, I no longer wish to live in this world.
And Orion's response is absolute. It perfectly highlights the vast disconnect between mortal desires and cosmic timelines. Orion tells him that even if Zayn sought the end with every single ounce of his will, it would not come. His fate is written until the day of resurrection.
He's trapped.
Zayn views his endless life as a curse, but Orion frames it as a unique, almost incomprehensible fortune. Orion tells him he has been granted the ultimate privilege to witness the entirety of creation, to see the springs return and the flowers bloom until the very end of time, because Zayn has tasted the water of life.
Which Zayn completely rejects. He essentially says he doesn't care about the flowers or the brooks, he just wants it to end. But Orion shuts the door entirely. He says nothing can be changed now. There is zero room for negotiation. And this is the moment that always strikes me as jarring, because the second Zayn realizes the divine door is closed, his tears dry up, and he immediately pivots to asking for military intelligence.
It seems jarring on the surface, moving from profound spiritual grief to asking about the size of Pharaoh's army. But I actually view it as the exact same coping mechanism.
How so? Like, how does that connect?
Think about his psychological state in that dark room. He has just been told definitively that he cannot escape the world of the living. If he simply sits in that tomb and dwells on his eternity, he will absolutely lose his mind. He needs an anchor. He needs a purpose grand enough to occupy a mind that spans centuries. If he cannot have the peace of the divine, he must immerse himself completely in the machinery of the profane. The grand geopolitical struggles of the era, like Hannibal's war efforts, are really the only things massive enough to distract him from his own endlessness.
That makes perfect sense. He needs the chaos of history to drown out the silence of his own immortality. So he asks Orion for intel on the Egyptian weaponry. But Orion refuses. He draws a strict boundary, stating that spirits cannot interfere in worldly political affairs. He knows Hannibal sent Zayn to Egypt for this purpose, but Zayn is entirely on his own. And with that, the spirit just fades away.
Which is the crucial turning point of the entire narrative. The supernatural intervention is over. From this moment forward, Zayn cannot rely on miracles. He has to rely entirely on his own accumulated skills.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This brings us to his arrival in Memphis, the Egyptian capital. The tone shifts from a supernatural meditation on grief straight into a high-stakes political spy thriller. Zayn needs a cover story to operate in the city, so he establishes himself as a master physician.
It is the perfect infiltration method. A healer is a universally respected figure who exists outside the normal class boundaries. A highly skilled physician can walk into the slums or the highest echelons of the military palace, and no one questions their presence. They are invisible because they are necessary.
And Zayn's reputation grows incredibly fast. He's treating the sick, earning his keep, until one afternoon a mounted soldier bursts into his room. No protocol, just demands that Zayn come immediately to treat a high-ranking military commander who is suffering from a crippling, blinding headache. This is the opening Zayn has been waiting for.
When he arrives, the commander is completely consumed by pain. Zayn provides an herbal remedy that offers temporary relief, but then he makes a wildly calculated move. He tells the commander that to cure the ailment permanently, he must open the skull and extract the source of the pain directly.
He pitches trepanation, ancient brain surgery, to one of the most powerful military figures in Egypt.
And we really need to put this into historical context to understand just how cynical Zayn's maneuver is here. In the ancient world, trepanation was often a highly spiritual or ritualistic practice, drilling into the skull to release evil spirits or relieve pressure. But Zayn isn't using it as a sacred healing art. He's using it as a purely mechanical, deeply calculated means to an end. It is a key to unlock a door.
The commander is rightfully skeptical. I mean, he asks if Zayn actually knows what he's doing, and Zayn smoothly fabricates this backstory about his ancestors practicing the art for generations without losing a single patient. The commander agrees, but with a brutal ultimatum. If I die, my soldiers will have your head. A literal life-or-death wager.
And Zayn accepts it without a flicker of hesitation. Imagine the sheer sociopathy, or perhaps just the absolute detachment required to make that bet. He wagers his own life because he knows with mathematical certainty that he will not fail. Zayn isn't just a talented doctor. He has had 1,000 years to study human anatomy.
The description of the surgery is so meticulous, it highlights that exact detachment. Zayn sterilizes his instruments in boiling water. He shaves the scalp, administers a heavy sedative, and makes a flawless incision. He bores a tiny hole through the bone and uses a fine wire to extract a blood clot pressing against the brain.
It is ancient neurosurgery executed with the precision of a machine. He replaces the bone, stitches the scalp with fine gold wire, and then, in an absolute masterclass of manipulation, he sits quietly by the bed, comforting the commander's distraught wife, playing the role of the humble, deeply empathetic healer.
When in reality, he is a cold-blooded operative who just successfully hacked his way into the Egyptian military elite. And the payoff is enormous. A week later, the commander is fully recovered. He is so overwhelmed with gratitude that he declares Zayn his brother, presses his hands to his chest, and grants Zayn unrestricted, unquestioned access to his palace.
Which was the objective from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Zayn is now inside the fortress. But what's fascinating is how he handles the follow-through. A lesser spy, mortal spy, would rush. They would feel the ticking clock of their own limited time and try to steal the intelligence immediately.
But Zayn has nothing but time.
Exactly. Time is his primary weapon. He spends an entire month just wandering the palace grounds, cultivating trust. He plays the long game. He acts completely absorbed in his medical texts, entirely uninterested in military affairs. He lets the commander get entirely comfortable with his presence.
Until he discovers the ultimate prize. Zayn learns that this specific commander is actually the head of the division responsible for the Empire's Manjanique, the Great Siege catapults.
These were the weapons of mass destruction for the era. Hannibal was a tactical genius, but to lay siege to fortified cities, to challenge the might of Rome or Egypt, you needed to understand heavy artillery. Knowing the schematics, the range, and the scale of the enemy's siege engines was intelligence that could tip the balance of empires.
Knowing this, Zayn makes his move. But again, he doesn't demand to see them. He just casually drops a comment one afternoon. He feigns this naive, modest curiosity about the legendary machines that supposedly rain fire and shatter stone. He even gives the commander an out, saying, "If you would rather not, I shall not press the matter."
It is brilliant psychological leverage. He knows the commander feels a profound moral debt for having his life saved. By acting humble and giving the commander the option to refuse, he practically guarantees the commander will insist on showing him.
And he does. The commander takes Zayn in a magnificent military chariot far out into the region of the pyramids. They arrive at this vast, dark hall carved directly into the face of a mountain armory. The text describes the ceiling soaring overhead, the entire space packed with the terrible machinery of Pharaoh's army.
To a normal person standing in that cavern, the sheer scale of the weaponry would be terrifying. These engines were designed to grind human bodies and stone walls to dust. The commander is sweeping his arms wide, boasting about the ruin he can unleash.
But Zayn isn't terrified. He is standing perfectly still, running his eyes over every single detail. He is treating the armory like a data set. He is mentally recording the schematics, the tension ropes, the counterweights, the sheer numbers of the machines. He is absorbing the exact knowledge Hannibal needs to dismantle this military machine. And he even strokes the commander's ego, feigning joy that Egypt is so powerfully protected.
He has everything he needs. The intelligence is secured in a mind that never forgets. The only remaining challenge is the exit. How do you walk out of the inner sanctum of the Egyptian military with their greatest state secrets?
You certainly don't sneak out in the dead of night. That triggers a manhunt. Instead, Zayn uses the very cover story that got him inside. He quietly lets it slip to the palace staff that he needs to travel to the deep jungles of Babylon to harvest rare medicinal herbs.
It's an unassailable alibi. He is a healer dedicated to his craft. Of course, he must seek out rare medicines. He goes to the commander directly to ask for permission to travel.
And the commander doesn't just grant permission. He is thrilled by Zayn's dedication. He promises to officially appoint Zayn as the royal physician the moment he returns. But the icing on the cake, the detail that truly proves Zayn's mastery of the situation, is what the commander gives him for the journey.
A military chariot escort.
It is incredibly ironic. Zayn rode into Memphis alone, an unremarkable man on a standard horse. He leaves the capital in a grand, high-speed military chariot drawn by powerful Arabian steeds, escorted and protected by the very army he is actively plotting to destroy.
It highlights the sheer efficiency of his operation. By manipulating the commander's trust, Zayn secures the fastest possible transport to the border. A journey that would typically take 3 grueling days is devoured in just a day and a half.
By the evening of the second day, they reach the edge of the Egyptian territory. The final sprint is deeply cinematic. Zayn slings his leather bag of medicines over his shoulder, steps out of the chariot, and mounts his own white horse. He turns back to the soldiers who escorted him. His heart is hammering, but his external composure is flawless. He waves a final measured goodbye, holding the illusion intact for the very last second.
At the absolute moment they turn away, he wheels his horse around and breaks into a full, driving gallop toward Elam. Toward Hannibal.
He leaves the border in the dust. The mission is an absolute staggering success. He has the blueprints to Pharaoh's mountain armory locked in his mind, and with every stride of the horse, he brings that devastating advantage closer to his commander.
It is a remarkable arc to step back and look at. We started this deep dive in the claustrophobic, stagnant air of an ancient tomb, watching a man weep for a mother who had been dead for 10 centuries, a man who felt crushed by the supernatural weight of his own immortality.
And we end it galloping across the open desert with a cold-blooded, highly effective operative who just orchestrated the perfect infiltration of a global superpower.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the insight that really surfaces is the reality of mastery. Zayn did not succeed in Memphis because he possessed supernatural powers. The Spirit Orient explicitly refused to intervene in the mortal world. Zayn succeeded because he weaponized his longevity.
He used his time.
Exactly. Immortality gave him the supreme patience to wait out his target, the deep psychological insight to manipulate an empire's elite, and the physical mastery of anatomy to wager his life on a surgical procedure. He survived, and he won, because he had 1,000 years to learn how to be flawless.
He didn't use magic to get the schematics. He used thousands of days of observing human nature until he could play a military commander like an instrument.
Time strips away the frantic anxiety that plagues mortal men. When you have forever, you don't make mistakes born of haste. You move with a terrifying, calculated certainty.
Which leaves us with a truly lingering, provocative question to consider. If you were granted 1,000 years of life, if you had the capacity to accumulate centuries of skills, knowledge, and infinite patience, what would that actually do to your humanity? Would that endless, rolling existence eventually file away your everyday human emotions? Empathy, fear, even love, do those things require the urgency of a short lifespan to exist? Or would a millennium eventually strip all that away, leaving you as nothing more than a flawless, sociopathic instrument of history, immune to everything except the mission in front of you?
It's a profound question about the value of our own limits.
Something to mull over the next time you find yourself awake in a quiet room, listening to the clock tick. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the shadows of the ancient world. We hope you found the exploration as compelling as we did, and we warmly invite you to return and join us for the next one.